Hey guys, it's Mark from Migraine Professional. Today I'm going to be answering sort of the second part of the previous video I did on why are my migraines and headaches being triggered from not eating. And now I'm going to be answering the question, why do I get migraines and headaches from eating or after eating? So it's really important to understand that whenever a food or around food time is triggering us, that it's either the food or how our body is digesting the food, or just that the food is too much of a load, that the actual act of eating is placing too much of a load on our body and it's kind of pushing us over a threshold, sending us into that migraine pain. So kind of as we get started, it's really important to understand our stages of digestion. So this is what allows us to either break the food down properly or aggravate things. Because when we don't break down our food properly, we can set ourselves up for dysbiosis, which is an imbalance of the gut bacteria. We can set ourselves up for parasites or infections or food sensitivities. If we're not breaking the food down, then whole particles can get into our circulation, our body can get sensitized to them, and then we can develop a serious long-term problem. So we want to make sure we can avoid that as much as possible. And that's by going through the stages of digestion. So throughout the stages of digestion, our body is taking a series of steps to break that food down. And I'm going to cover a little bit later in the RDR like what is kind of the deciding factor between those working or not working. So the stages of digestion, first, your cephalic phase, your very first stage of digestion is your very first stage of digestion is your thinking or feeling or seeing or smelling the actual food. As soon as the thought comes into our brain, our body starts churning. It starts building up the liquids that are needed to break that food down. So we want to make sure that phase exists, because that's one of the easiest phases to kind of skip over. If we are going and we feel hunger or we think we need to eat, we can continue going in our heads while we're eating. And that completely shuts down the first phase of digestion and the most important phase to make sure that our body is ready for the food, it's breaking down the food properly, it's absorbing that food properly. It's really important to think of our food. You just take a second and kind of think about it, be there with it, be present with it, be mindful with it, and eat that food. Next stage, chewing, mastication. It's the most important for actually breaking the big pieces of food down, because our stomach acid and our digestive juices are only so powerful. They cannot break down big chunks. They need help. So the more that we can break that food down, chew that food, the better, because our body doesn't absorb solids. It absorbs liquids. So you have to make sure that you're chewing that food, you're chewing it many times. If you need to stop swallowing, swallow a little bit later than you normally would. Do extra chews, take some specific time to chew your food more, to break it down, to make sure that it's a liquid. As the great Paul Chek says, you have to make sure that you drink your food and chew your water. Because when you're drinking your food, that food has become a liquid. And when you're chewing your water, you are filling that water, water is fairly empty of nutrients, and it can't be absorbed by the body because the body has to make an isotonic solution, which is the same as its internal self. So it has to fill it with vitamins and minerals to be able to absorb it. So whenever you're filling it with your salivary juices, then you're helping to support the digestion of it and breaking it down. Then after mastication, you have your stomach. And so your stomach, it's there to protect you because it secretes a very powerful acid called hydrochloric acid, which can get to a pH of 1 or 2. It's very powerful. And this stomach acid has to be there to start off the digestive process, to make sure that our bile is secreted, to prevent any organisms that are in the food from getting into our gut and taking up sort of residence in our gut, living in our gut, creating dysbiosis, giving us infections, parasites, all of these things. It's prevented by making sure that we have a strong enough stomach acid. And the absolute most important to make sure that we have strong stomach acid is not feeling stressed when we're eating. Being there with our food, and being present with it, not feeling stressed, not worrying about other things, being right here, right now with the food. I mean, I can't stress it enough. It's so important because without that, without the digestive acid getting strong enough, we don't secrete our bile and our other digestive juices properly. We can't prevent those parasites from kind of getting through. We can't kill those parasites. So it's absolutely important we do that. Then after the stomach, we enter the intestines. The intestines are a long tube full of lots of microorganisms, and this is where our powerful enzymes are secreted. Our bile and our enzymes and our fats are broken down, and everything is broken down from its tiny particles into its even tinier building blocks, right? From our fats to our fatty acids, from our proteins to our amino acids, and from our sugars, from our glucose and our carbohydrates and our starches to our sugars and the only tiny particles that we can actually use in our body. We cannot use these giant particles, and if they're actually getting through, our body can sensitize itself to them. So we have to make sure that we keep them out as much as possible. We break the food down. So throughout these stages, it's absolutely important that we're there with the food, we're chewing it properly, we're making sure that our stomach is actually working. If we're getting reflux, that's often a sign that our stomach acid is not strong enough and it's not being pushed into our intestines. We want to make sure that if we're getting fullness in our liver, fullness in our side, if we're getting gas, if we're getting diarrhea, constipation, this is a sign that our stages of digestion are working. For some reason, something is going on. We want to make sure that we look into it. And then the next really big thing, and this is really big within migraine and headache sufferers, is that a percentage of them have been found to actually be low in an enzyme called diamine oxidase. Diamine oxidase actually breaks down amines like histamine and tyramine. So histamine and tyramine, they're natural parts of the food that we eat, and they're naturally produced in the body, but high levels of it can create lots of problems. One of the sort of side effects or direct effects of them is headaches and migraines. So you want to be careful. You want to make sure, you want to see, because a lot of the most popular migraine and headache food lists are actually those that contain histamine, high tyramine foods. So you want to be careful. You want to kind of see, are those triggering you? Are those a problem specifically for you? That's always one of the big things to be ruled out. And I'm going to link to an article in the description that really breaks it down. It's the histamine migraine connection, and it kind of breaks everything down for you simply. So I'll link that in the description. And then we got our RDR. So we have two sides to our autonomic nervous system. We have our sympathetic side, which is our fight or flight. It's very sympathetic to everything around it. It's very, it's worried about our safety and security. It's fight, flight, or flee. It's just worried about dealing with the situation that's going on right now. It just wants to make sure that we get out alive. That is it. That's all it cares about. Then we have our parasympathetic nervous system. So our parasympathetic nervous system, it's there to rest, digest, and repair. And that is the state that we want to be inside of whenever we're eating. Whenever we are there with our food, we're breaking that food down, we want to make sure that we are present with it, that we just take a moment. Simplest way to get into our rest, digest, and repair parasympathetic nervous system is to just take a moment, just relax, just brush it off, shake off the stress, feel the tight muscles and kind of loosen them up. Just let go of all that tension you're holding on to, all that stress you're holding on to, any problems or worries, or those are problems for another time, not right now. When you're eating, when you're digesting, you have to make sure that you're in this state when you're eating, when you're taking in food, so that you can break down it properly, so that your stages of digestion are working properly. Otherwise, your food isn't going to digest. It's going to sit in your stomach. You're going to have whole pieces of food in your stool. You're going to have all kinds of different problems. You're going to have, one of the most common is that parasites and funguses and these organisms that live in our gut that take over, they're actually almost like a secondary mechanism recruited by the body. If we are eating food and we're not digesting it and absorbing it, these organisms will take our digestive system's place, and they will live there, break it down, eat it themselves. But then we kind of have to deal with the secondary negative effect of dealing with their poo. All of the waste that they excrete gets absorbed into our body. We have to deal with it. It clogs our liver. It creates a ton of different problems. So we want to make sure that we're eating the food, we're digesting it properly. And that kind of takes me into the next part, which is imbalances. So these imbalances they're really big, and they're not talked about because the gut is seen so far away from the brain. But it's really important to understand, first off, leaky gut. So leaky gut. So generally in our gut, we have a lining that is there. It's a tube. That lining is there to protect us. That actually keeps everything out of our body and in the gut that should be out of our body, because things that are not through that gut wall are technically still outside of the body, because it is one tube from the mouth to your butt. It is one big long tube. Anything that is inside of that tube is technically still outside of the body. So we want to keep it that way. But what happens in leaky gut is that wall and the space between the cells starts to open up. And then through those spaces, bigger particles, microorganisms, toxins, genetic material, all sorts of different things can get through that and into circulation. And then we develop a big problem. And this is one of the reasons that 70% of our immune system is in the gut. And a massive amount of our nervous system is in the gut, because it needs to be very, very finely regulated. So we want to make sure that we are addressing leaky gut. We're healing our gut so that it's not leaky, so particles aren't getting through. If a particle can get through into our bloodstream, our immune system can target it, it can attack it, it can become sensitized to it, and then we can develop sensitivities, we can develop all kinds of just inflammation throughout. And so I'll link to a video in the description on the difference and kind of the connections between leaky gut and leaky brain and migraines. And so what we want to understand in the next part is dysbiosis. So dysbiosis, along with SIBO and SIFO, which are small intestinal bacterial overgrowth and small intestinal fungal overgrowth, they are basically, they're situations where the balance of microbiota and the 100 trillion organisms that are there to support us in our gut, it starts to shift. And with the advent of lots of chronic stress and C-sections and antibiotics and processed foods, this sort of balance starts to shift, where a normal healthy individual would have about 80% good bacteria and 20% bad bacteria. It kind of starts to shift, and now we're finding that many more people are experiencing 80% bad bacteria, 20% good bacteria, so that there's a drastic change in our microbiota, and that means that there's a drastic change in how the microbiota can add to our resiliency and to keeping our trigger levels down, even with eating junk food and whatever, and foods that are full of pesticides and fungicides and toxins. Those microbiota are there to neutralize those and help excrete those. But now we're sort of developing problems where they're not there to do that. So then we would develop dysbiosis, SIBO, and SIFO. So we want to make sure those are treated properly, those are addressed, those are tested for, and then we're kind of supplementing with prebiotics and probiotics so that our gut bacteria are fed properly, and that they can create postbiotics, which are the nutrients that they feed our body and help our body kind of absorb and use to function properly. Then, of course, we have parasites. Now, parasites are a category of organisms, everything from tapeworms to little tiny bacteria that are very, they can be acutely damaging, whereas you start getting diarrhea, constipation, vomiting, whatever, but they can also be very, very chronically just disabling. They can destroy your digestive capacity. They can absolutely overrun your body with inflammation. They can clog up your liver, give you all kinds of cognitive issues. So it's incredibly important to be tested and to have parasites ruled out. Now, of course, you want to be making sure that you're eating lots of digestible fibers, soluble fibers, resistant starches, and foods that feed good gut bacteria. So between those, you want to make sure that you're supporting your stages of digestion, that you're living in that rest, digest, and repair mode, and that you're make sure that amines aren't a problem for you. Because if they're a problem for you, then you can do targeted therapies towards that. And of course, you always want to make sure that if a food is triggering you, or if your migraines and headaches are being triggered after you eat, that you're addressing the imbalances that can kind of clog up the body and skyrocket your trigger levels and throw you over your threshold. So I'm going to link to a article in the description on the kind of what created this video, which is the what to do about migraines and headaches that are triggered from not eating and then after eating. And I'm going to link to the video on the leaky gut, leaky brain connection, as well as the article on the histamine migraine connection. So let me know in the comments below, have you ever had a problem with histamines? And do you find you have any problems with your stages of digestion or any digestive symptoms? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks. Hey, it's Mark from migraineprofessional.com. Thank you for watching this video. Make sure to subscribe in the bottom left corner. And if you want to learn more about migraines and headaches than you've ever known before, and understand what causes them, what creates them, and what you can do about them, make sure to go to migraineprofessional.com. Thanks.